All right, so I'm starting a new series here where I talk to different agents just about anything real estate related, right? So today, this is going to be the first one, and I have Jake from Rooftop Realty in Syracuse, New York. And we were kind of talking off camera, and we wanted to kind of dive into everybody's role in the real estate transaction in New York State, right? Because we're an attorney state.
Right.
So we have a little bit more hands in the pot. So I guess let's start with your role, because you guys are really the quarterback of the deal.
Right.
So,
right. Well, I actually think you're the quarterback of the deal, because nothing happens. A lot of people don't have the cash they need to buy a house, so they have to go to you, right? So you kind of let us know what people can afford and how much taxes and this and that and the other. So I kind of think of you as the quarterback, because without you, there kind of is no me, because I don't have a whole lot of cash buyers, and there's not a whole lot of cash buyers.
Right.
90% of people need a loan to buy a home. So that's where it's really good to have a really good lender in your corner, somebody that I always say you're not going to work with anybody if you don't know, like, or trust them, right? That's basically what it comes down to. And on top of that, for real estate agents, I think it's really important to have a lender that like, trust, but also it's just going to get the job done, right? Because there's so many other lenders out there that maybe don't talk to the clients during the whole transaction. And that's just not the way it should be.
Yeah. Especially for first-time home buyers, right?
Oh, absolutely. Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm in contact with my first-time home buyers at least 2 or 3 times a week during the whole process.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit off camera about, like, our styles. I think they're pretty similar, where, like, we're not really salespeople, right?
Right,
so
exactly.
we kind of, like, guide them along.
Right,
like, you kind of gave an example of, you're like, we're not going to buy this house.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if I go into a house, you can immediately kind of tell, especially with the buyers you're working with, you can say, yeah, listen, guys, this is not the one. Whether it's foundation issues or there's cosmetic issues or there's just something there that doesn't feel right. It's really, for me, it's a gut feeling, right? So when people call me, I want them to feel like they're talking to a brother, sister, uncle, cousin, mom, dad, whatever. Yeah. Because I want them to feel like family. I want them to feel like I have their best interest in mind, and I'm trying to protect them, which I am, from either overpaying or, buying a house that's going to collapse on itself or need a ton of work.
How do you go about, like, gaining that trust, right? Like, what's your, like, do you kind of, like, dive into, like, what's their family situation? Like, how do you go about gaining their trust?
Well, I think I like to keep my personal life and my real estate business kind of on separate levels. I'm an expert in the real estate field. And as you know, I wrote mortgages for a while too. So I kind of have the best of both worlds. And when I'm talking to people, I kind of gauge what their goals and long-term and short-term goals are, because, for example, I always think if I'm talking to my buyers, I'm always asking certain questions. Okay, like, how long do you plan on being in this house, right? And I'm looking at the house itself also, and I'm saying, what here is,
was it aligned with their goals, right?
Exactly, right. If it's, are you going to be here for 5 years? Because if we're going to be here for 5 years, maybe we can't necessarily pay an exorbitant amount or overbid, right? So I'm uncomfortable, even not like in this market. I'm uncomfortable, and I'll tell my clients this, and they'll attest to it. I'll tell you, listen, this is not a good deal. Even if you go into the house and it's a beautiful house, but maybe it's $15,000 or $20,000 overpriced than fair market value. I will tell them that. I'll say, yeah, you like it. That's fine. I'm just telling you right now, it's overpriced. And if they still want to continue, they understand, like, hey, it's overpriced. And I tell them, in this area, houses tend to appreciate. But if you're gonna call me to sell in 2 or 3 years, you're never gonna get your money back for it, right? If you're gonna be here for the long term, 10, 20, 30 years, then yeah, your house will probably be worth more at that point. But you and I both know, on average, what's a mortgage loan or people, first-time home buyers are in their house maybe 7, 8 years. Yeah, that's on average. So to gain their trust, I'm just upfront and honest with them. That's it. I just upfront and honest about the process, about what they want and how they're going to get there.
Yeah. Does that ever, so let's say you guys are looking through a house, right? And you're like, this place is not what you guys are looking for, but they're like adamant. Do you ever feel like sense of like discouragement, from them? And if so, like, what do you do to like kind of like get them in the right track again?
When buyers feel discouraged, obviously I'm here to kind of put that to the side.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be discouraged when looking for a house, especially in a market like this
That we've seen, right? Where you're losing out on
there's
20 offers.
Yeah, exactly. So you're going to be discouraged. The biggest thing I tell my buyers is patience pays in this business, right? You're so eager to buy a house and you've got this pre-approval and you're ready to go. It could take a month. It could take 6 months. It could take a year to find what you want and what you're looking for. And so I always tell them, when we find the right one, you will know it, right? Number one. And number two, patience will always pay.
Yep. I like that.
Because if you rush into something, just like anything in life, if you rush into something, a lot of times it may not be the right decision and you're going to regret it.
Yep.
My motto is actually it's used by, I think it's used by the Pentagon. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's like one of those like John Wooden ones, like be fast but don't hurry.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's more for like the buyers, right? Now, what do you say to sellers too? Like obviously, like it's important to get listings and that kind of thing.
Right.
But on the flip side, you're a champion for the buyer, right? You're like their like champion. You're like trying to get them to what their goals are. But you're also doing the same for the seller, right? Trying to get them exactly what they're asking for, and then finding the house that they want to, maybe upgrade or downsize, whatever it may be.
Right.
But in this market where sellers don't know where to go, right? Like, do you have to have that conversation with them about like, listen, we have to be patient. Like, we can get your house under contract, no problem, but it's going to be, require patience to try and find the next landing spot.
Right. And that comes with like negotiating the offers that come in. And now with sellers, you also have to be careful because yes, the houses have exponentially grown in value in the last 2 or 3 years, but with sellers, you almost have to kind of bring them back down to earth a little bit because, your house still is not worth $1 million. Okay. Most of the time, maybe there are cash buyers and you don't have to worry about appraisals. But for me, I'm always looking on the back end of your side of things, right? It's like, we're going to have to pass an appraisal. And if we price this too high to begin with, and then it continues to go high, are we going to have issues if we accept a financed offer? Yeah. Right? Because
are they going to be willing to cover the appraisal gap? Right.
Right. Exactly. There's a lot of different factors that go into, determining what the proper sales price is. And, is it going to actually be able to, is the financing going to be actually able to hold up during the process? Just because there are so many factors that you have to consider as well.
Right. Like, you're their champion on like kind of like the front lines and me, I'm like almost like the voice of reason, so to speak. Like they might love this $500,000 house, but they might hate the payment and they might hate the taxes on it. So like, kind of like bring them back down to earth and like get them realigned to like where they really want to be.
Right.
And that's all part of that conversation that I have with them. Right. In the qualifying before I issue the pre-qual letter.
Right.
We just back into where they want to be in terms of the payment and then cash to close.
Exactly. Right. And I think that comes down to that question is essentially, what are your goals? Right. I mean, what's your payment goal? That's basically what it comes down to. Same thing with me. What are your long-term, short-term goals? What in the area is going to affect value now? What's going to affect it in the future? Yep. There's a lot of different factors that you have to consider when you're either selling or purchasing a house. And, going with the goals first, I don't think you can ever do bad business.
Right. 100%. All right, so we talked about, the appraisal being super important, right, especially in the rising market. So let's talk about the role of the appraiser then, right? Like they're the ones that really put the value on the house, right? Whether the deal is going to either proceed or unfortunately kill it, right? Because they can't come to an agreement, right? So So let's say a house under appraises, right? And what goes through, like, what's your process with your clients to kind of either prepare them, or what steps you take to help them move forward with the house or without?
Yeah, so let's put it into perspective from the buyers and sellers, because they're both obviously different. Buyers, and again, I've come from your side of the deal, right? I've understood mortgage, I've done that side of things, and I've talked to many appraisals. And appraisals are not exact sciences, right? They're not, but they get pretty close, right? Because really what they're doing is they're looking within a half-mile radius of houses that are very similar that have sold for
whatever
in the so you kind of understand what the goal of the appraiser is. It's to put the value for the bank, really,
and the buyer, really, too, like protecting them, right?
Exactly, right. So when an appraisal comes in low, which I will say rarely happens with my buyers, it usually doesn't happen because I do my research and I know what the market value is and I know what an appraisal will hold before we even go look at the house. And again, that's an important thing to know the market surrounding you. Are you looking at a house that's overpriced already, or are you looking at a house that's underpriced already, right? And agents have two different ways of pricing houses. So it's definitely a tricky thing if you don't have the right tools and knowledge to help you with that. But as for the buyers, if they come into a situation where the appraisal is over what they paid, fantastic, wonderful, right? They have equity right off the bat, okay? But if they don't and the house underappraises, then we have to decide, actually, the buyers have to decide what is worth it to them, right? So if it underappraises by $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, my advice is we don't even touch it. We walk away, the deal is dead, because the house
is not worth
what you're paying for.
Right.
Now, when the appraisal comes in maybe a little bit low, $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, my first step is we always go to the sellers, right? We always go back to the seller's agent and we say, hey, the house underappraised, we need you to drop the price, right? So that's always the first step. And then from there, you reignite or you restart the negotiations, right? So, and there's definitely different ways that you can combat a low appraisal, right? Maybe the appraisal does come in low, $5,000, and maybe the seller's fine, okay, we'll drop the price and we'll call it a day, right? Maybe the seller's adamant, no, I'm not gonna drop the price. At that point, there's a couple of options that you do have options, right? They're not ideal, right? But at that point you can say, okay, well, seller, how about you drop $2,500 and we bring an extra $2,500 to closing to kind of make up that difference, right? And again, not the ideal situation, but it can work that way,
right?
So overpaying in this market versus the appraisal, a few thousand is okay, but if you're going $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 over, it's definitely I fear for their future.
Right. And like you said, there are options, right? Like there's the appraisal gap, and then at an absolute last resort, from the bank's perspective, I could always go to the underwriter and say, hey, listen, we could always question the comps too that the appraiser used.
That's right.
Right. So if you guys think, you being the realtors, think there are comps that should be taken under consideration that the appraiser did not, use, I can always go to the underwriter and ask the underwriter to go to the appraiser, and because I can't contact the appraiser, but ask them, hey, can we include these comps? And the appraiser's going to either say yes or no, and that's kind of like Supreme Court judge. Like that's the answer.
Exactly. So,
and then this is important too to note, like this is the appraisal, right? Not the home inspection.
Exactly.
It's completely separate.
And so many people are confused. On, oh, do I need a home inspection? And then you say, well, yeah, you can have a home inspection, but you have to have an appraisal.
Appraisal required.
It's so, and so many people are confused. So I think that's important too.
But the appraiser's not going to look at GFI outlets or like the what let me look at the electrical panel, but they're not
Appraisers
looking,
are looking for safety issues, and that's it.
yeah,
right?
peeling paint.
They're not going to look at your plumbing. They're going to make sure the toilet flush and the water runs. That's it, right? They're going to make sure that there's no chipping paint due to lead issues.
Right.
They're going to make sure there's no broken glass so you don't cut your hand.
Right.
They're going to make sure there's railing so you don't fall down the stairs. Really, other than that, they're not looking at anything internally with the house. They rarely go into the attic.
Yeah.
They, the basement, they can't tell if a foundation is bowing or what. So really, that's where the home inspection comes in.
Right. The home inspector is really the person, a third party, like total, like, not involved in the transaction, give you an unbiased opinion of the the integrity of the house.
Right. And I will say this about home inspections. Even on new builds, something is going to be wrong with your house. Right. It's just the natural way of life. Right. Humans aren't perfect, and they build houses, and houses are never going to be perfect. So, if you're a first-time home buyer or you're a repeat home buyer, when you get that home inspection report, expect something to be wrong. Right. What is too far gone to be wrong? Right. Is a GFI, like you mentioned, is a GFI in the bathroom that's above the sink, is that a huge deal?
Right.
Depends. I mean, if to me, no.
No, you just change it out.
Because you can change a GFCI, you can change a plug very easily, $10 plug at Home Depot or Lowe's. But if you come in and the home inspector says, listen, we had foundation issues, or we have water in the basement and it looks like the water is building up and it's blowing the wall, then you say that's kind of a huge safety issue, because if you don't have a foundation, you don't have a house. Right.
That's kind of like, I wanted to point that out too, like the difference between the appraisal and the inspection, because I do get that quite a bit. I'm sure you do too. Now, New York State, we're a little bit different, right? We're an attorney state.
Right.
So
yes,
the sellers are going to have an attorney, the buyer's going to have an attorney, and the bank's going to have an attorney. Right. Now, the bank and the buyer's attorney can be the same.
Be the same, right.
The sellers and the bank attorney cannot be the same, right? So it's just another hand in the pot. But, like the home inspector, like the realtor, and like myself, the attorneys have your best interest, right? They're looking at the contract, reviewing it, and make sure that everything is on the up and up.
Yeah, and a lot of state, and this is why it takes 60, 70 days to close in New York, is because we are an attorney state. I mean, if you go down to, let's say, Florida, they're what's called a title state, right? So they can close in 30 days because they get the title, and then you pay for title insurance.
That's it.
Now, up here, you can certainly pay for title insurance, right? You can get title insurance, but the attorneys still have to look it over. And that could be due to how old our real estate laws are, right? Florida's real estate laws are definitely not as old as New York's. But in general, yes, the attorneys have the buyers or seller, whoever they're working for, obviously they have to have their client's best interest in mind, or you hope so. But that's why it's important to have an attorney that, again, like, and trust. And a lot of people, or even a lot of first-time home buyers, I would say, don't know an attorney, right? And that's where it's important that, for the bank, they have an attorney that you trust, and for me, I have a slew of attorneys that I trust to use, that I know are going to be responsive, which is one of the hardest things to find in an attorney, is responsiveness. Like, are they going to be on top of it? Are they going to respond to you? Are they going to seem like they care about the deal? But like you mentioned, the attorneys get title work, right? So what they're doing, whether it's with the bank or whether it's with the buyer and the seller, really, they're getting the title work, and they're going back, I mean, how long is it? 40, 50 years.
Yeah, a long time. Yeah.
And they're looking at not only the ownership of the property, but they're also looking at if there's been any liens on the property, any past, collections on the property, taxes that are outstanding. And so, and that goes back a long, long time. So they are looking through all that to make sure that the buyer or seller is not selling or buying a home that maybe a lender or somebody can come back and say, hey, I own this, or hey, you owe this lien, even though it was this person it's with the property. It's not
Right.
with, you know what I mean?
Right,
The lien is with the
100%.
property, not necessarily the person.
Yep. And that's what's like super important. Like you mentioned it, know, like, and trust.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's like the biggest thing you can take away from this conversation is having a real estate team, that that operates like you do, that communicates like you do. But for me, the way that I operate, like I like to hold, like I was a first time home buyer before. Right. So I love working with first time home buyers. They require some hand holding, which I love to do. Right. I love educating.
Right, exactly. I think we're very similar in that regard.
Right, like you do a lot of the educational stuff too.
Right.
Like I see on Instagrams. Right, so I always like to make sure that they are fully aware of what's going on within that first conversation. I tell them about next steps. We get everything up front, so there's no surprises in underwriting.
Right.
And then we issue that pre-qual letter, and then you kind of take it over from there.
Right.
And do your process to gain their trust and move forward to what their goals are.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so important. We keep going back to the know, like, and trust. Now, in my business and in your business, I'm sure there are people that meet you and they don't necessarily like you. Right. Same thing with me. People meet me and they don't necessarily like me. Right. I would advise those people to find somebody that you like. Don't use me if you don't like me.
I'm not a match for everybody. You're not a match for everybody. Yep,
right?
100%.
Just like relationships. I don't want to, I don't want to date you, no offense.
Right.
but that's how it works.
Yeah.
Same thing in the real estate industry. Because I promise you, if you work with somebody that you don't necessarily know, you don't necessarily like, and you don't necessarily trust, it's going to be a long, tenuous process. Because you're not going to know if that person is really looking out for you, right? Or maybe you feel like they're not doing their job well. So you just have to find somebody that you jive with, that you get along with, you know. And not everybody is a match, and that's okay. And that's what I've come to determine in my almost 10 years of doing between mortgage and real estate. Not everybody's going to be a match.
Right.
Not everybody's going to want to work with me, and that's okay.
Yep.
They're wrong, but.
Right. Well, no, I appreciate you hopping on. This was great. If you guys have any questions on either the mortgage process, real estate process, or just real estate in general, our contact information is going to be right below.